Hi, everyone. I hope that you're all doing really well today. Welcome to our webinar. We're going to get started in just a few minutes. Um, while we're while we're waiting, can everybody just pop in the chat where you're coming from today? I will tell you, I am in Boston and it is freezing. It's a balmy 42 outside today, so winter has hit us. Um, oh, great. Look, I'm seeing lots of people coming in. I've got people from California, Texas. Wow, there's lots. I see Colorado. Oh, I see Maine. Yes, it is colder up there, even still than us. We have Columbia, South Carolina, Tampa, Florida, Miami, Florida. I'm very jealous of you in Florida. San Antonio, Texas. Nice. Cranford, New Jersey. I have, yeah, North Carolina at 62 degrees. North Carolina has nice weather all the time. Puerto Rico. Okay, very nice. We've got 61 degrees in Montana. Great. See if we can let a few more people come in. Oh, Virginia. We've got Virginia represented today. Oh, it's in the 70s in Vegas. That must be 7 degrees in Saskatchewan. No idea what it is in Fahrenheit. Well, I don't know what it is in Celsius, so I don't know what that conversion would be. It's hard to do in my head. Let's see. Chicago, it's 40 degrees. Okay, so same. All right. Well, this is great. So exciting to see so many people from all over the place. I think we'll go ahead and start right now. Um, so, welcome and good afternoon. Welcome to Strategies for Facilitating Deliberative Dialogue in the College Classroom, presented by the Association of College and University Educators. I am Alyssa Koff, and I'm the Senior Digital Marketing Manager at ACUE. For those of us who are less familiar with our work, ACUE partners with higher education institutions to deliver excellence in every classroom through a complete faculty development ecosystem, including the only nationally recognized certification in effective teaching that's endorsed by the American Council on Education. Today's webinar is focused on how to create space for thoughtful, respectful dialogue in the classroom, which is both urgent and challenging in today's increasingly polarized world. We have gathered some excellent panelists who will help us examine the role of deliberative dialogue in fostering civil discourse and critical thinking, address the common challenges faculty encounter, and also explore practical strategies for navigating difficult conversations. And by the end of this webinar, you'll be able to have actionable tools and insights you can use confidently to guide students through meaningful discussions on complex and often contentious issues. But before we dive in, I just want to talk a little bit about housekeeping. First, you're welcome to use the chat. We hope you do to communicate with one another and to comment on our discussion and share ideas. But if you have questions, please put that in the Q&A, and the panelists will be able to answer those during the conversation, and those that we don't get to, we're going to set aside some time at the end to answer those questions. But please note that our host and panelists will cover a lot today, but they may not get to every type of course and every type of population. Their plan today is to go deep rather than wide, and they hope to answer as many of your questions as they as are possible. So, without further ado, I'm going to hand this off to our host, Adam Smith. Adam is the founder and senior consultant of Smith Education Associates and a nationally recognized higher education expert. He is joined by an amazing panel who will discuss how to foster deliberative dialogue on your campuses. So, Adam, take it away.
Thanks, Alyssa. Appreciate that. Always appreciative to ACUE for leading some amazing work, doing some really, really important conversations. This is just another one of those. One of the questions that came up in the chat, are you going to get the recording? Yes, everyone who registered will get the recording in a week or so. So whether you attended or not, you're going to get access to the recording. Want to introduce my panelists, Dr. Zack Ritter. He's the Associate Director of Strategic Initiatives at the University of California, Los Angeles' Center for Community Engagement. Dr. Laurie Pendleton is the Executive Director of Faculty Success at ACUE, and also wanted to introduce Dr. Rosie Bolen, who's the Director of Solidarity, Engagement, and Success Initiatives at Mount St. Mary University. It's good to have you all here. Thanks everyone for joining us. These conversations are really, really important. It's even better the more you all participate. So I want to encourage you to use that Q&A function for any questions. First question I wanted to ask you, we're going to put up a quick poll. What is your current role at your, put this in the chat. What is your current role and institution? So we all know where we are and what the temperature is. So in the chat, please put in your current role and institution if you want to share institution that you serve, just to help us get an idea of people's roles, institution or institution type. Are you at a community college, a liberal arts institution, flagship institution, an HBCU? We got some Tuskegee folks, shout out. So that really helps, right? For all of us as Rosie and Laurie and Zack and I try to frame this conversation to make sure we're meeting your individual needs. Second, how comfortable, we're going to put up a poll, how comfortable are you currently with deliberative dialogue? How aware of it are you? And how comfortable are you with deliberative dialogue for your current role, in the current role you're in? Either very comfortable, ranging all the way down to not comfortable at all. Just pick one. Shout out to my Minnesota State Mankato family, Mavericks. Go ahead and please vote in the poll so we can get an idea of people's comfort level with deliberative dialogue. Yeah, kind of in the middle, right? So the majority of us are either somewhat or not very. So we're hoping that when you leave today and when we're done today with this conversation, everybody just kind of levels up one spot, right? And we feel a little bit more comfortable. The advantage to this, if you're like me, you need things real time. So everybody's going to get the recording. And just like I do when I try to put the air filter in my car, you can refer back to it before you do things in class, and you can hear from the experts slowly. Hey, what was that thing that Rosie said again? What is that thing that I need to apply in my class that Laurie said? Could be really, really helpful. So thank you all very much. First question, we're going to turn to Laurie, because Laurie is the pro who can help us and has helped folks at ACUE help define and describe what deliberative dialogue is and what it is not. Laurie, can you help us with that a little bit?
Sure. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you, Adam. I'm very happy to be here with this panel and talking about deliberative dialogue. One of the ways to really think about deliberative dialogue is to think about all the different types of conversations that we have in our classrooms with students. And we think of them a little bit across the continuum. So conversations are typically informal, spontaneous, and we talk about many different topics, go from one to another. There's not necessarily a clear structure or goal. We're not looking for a task there. Discussion tends to narrow the focus to a specific topic or a specific issue. And in discussions, we ask participants to share their different ideas, opinions, or positions. But again, the goal of discussion is to get different opinions out. Dialogue goes deeper by exploring reasons, stories, other kinds of evidence behind different positions and beliefs that folks have. And we really are looking for mutual understanding. Deliberative dialogue builds on the dialogue and is different from debate, which I'll talk about in a second. Really, deliberative dialogue has us as a group of folks engaging in this discussion, weighing and comparing different perspectives, looking for shared understanding, and potentially leading to collective action. So we may, as a group, decide, okay, so this is what you think, this is what I think, this is what a third person may think. What do we have in common, and what might we do as a result of this discussion? What are some other things that we can do going forward? It really combines this digging into conversation or topics that we do with dialogue. But when we think about debate, we're really thinking more about winners and losers. And I have my opinion, and I'm stating my opinion or my facts. You're stating your opinions and your facts, and we're looking at who has the stronger case. In deliberative dialogue, we're looking for more of shared understanding. So things like, I didn't think about it from that perspective, or that's interesting evidence. Where did it come from? Where did you find it? So those kinds of things for deliberative dialogue. It has all kinds of different names: civil discourse, constructive conversations. Lots of people call it different things. Here at ACUE, we stuck with and kind of honed into deliberative dialogue because we like the term dialogue and then the thoughtfulness behind deliberation.
Really good, Laurie. And I think talking about and being deliberate and intentional in the naming of it, because it is about a dialogue and trying to have shared understanding, right? Zack, I know you in your work at UCLA, but your broader work, some of the amazing work you've done is training with Palestinian students and with Israeli students and Jewish students and Muslim students and others, all around really hard conversations, right? That date back, Zack, thousands of years, right? What are some of the strategies you use? Because some of this for us as educators is just modeling, right? Because people say some, in those conversations, I'm sure as an Ashkenazi Jewish man, there's some people say some crazy stuff. So how do you not only teach deliberative dialogue in those really hard conversations that are really charged, but also how do you model it as a master instructor? How do you do that?
Well, thank you so much. I think one of the only people that calls me a master instructor is my mom sometimes when she calls me. So I really do appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you.
My
Thank
gosh.
you. Um, um, you know, I was trained at UCLA as a graduate student in intergroup dialogue, which is Jimena Zuniga. So if people are interested, Zuniga, Jimena Zuniga. And she's a scholar out of University of Michigan. And you know, there's three parts to this deliberative process where it is part one is the class needs to get to know each other before you jump into the hot topic, right? So if we're talking about Israel-Palestine, if we're talking about Muslim-Jewish relations in America, we're talking about Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, which is stuff that I do with my Muslim and Jewish colleagues in Isma Shema Consulting, which is what we created after the horrific events of October 7th to get people to talk to each other. You can't just jump into the hot topic because people are just going to come with uh, different baggage, different hates, different misunderstandings, things that they've been seeing and downloading into their brain from social media, some good, some bad. So how do you do that cultural sharing and get people to know each other, which may take a couple weeks in a class, right? And then you can actually jump into some of the hot topics, but then people also just end with the hot topic. Okay, we did our job, we talked about it. Now everyone's kind of maybe upset, and the day's over. No, the next couple weeks of the course is actually, now that you've built this trust and talked about the difficult thing, then you go out into the community in your local community, and you do some type of action project to solidify those bonds. Now, to your earlier question, it's really, really difficult. Because especially when having conversations around race, class, gender, anything with equity and justice, people are, it's charged, and people will record you, people will try to get you canceled. It's a very scary time. But I think in a classroom, there's a unique opportunity where people can look each other in the eyeballs, and they have to actually put down their cell phones and look at each other's humanity. And it's okay to deeply disagree with one another, and to also understand the power imbalance in the room and a power imbalance in the world, but to actually listen to the humanity and the pain and the trauma of someone who's sitting across from you. You don't have to agree with their political notions, but the number one thing that I'd like to tell people to walk away from this is, if you come in and you tell someone they are completely wrong and they are stupid and bad, and you walk away from them, they're going to dig in deeper to whatever they were just thinking. But if you sit with that person and you listen to their pain and trauma and really deeply listen, and I think we'll get into some of that, you can at least have a human moment and maybe persuade them to your side. But people are not going to be persuaded to whatever you have to say if you don't hear some of their pain and trauma. And again, you don't have to agree with all of it, but that's the beginning part, that human aspect.
Yeah, Zack, that's so good. One of the things I notice in my classes is even the configuration of the room. If the configuration of the room is lecture style, where students are just looking at each other's backs of heads and then looking at me, first off, I hate that. But I want to create pods of connection and villages essentially with each other. And then they have chances to talk about other things. And then we get into something a little harder. Then they know that they have trust. And sometimes, as the instructors, we want to get them there, right? We have our learning, we got to get you there rather than I got to give you grace and give you time. And that isn't my job to work on you. At some point, those minds get changed by, hey, Adam gave me grace and Adam loved me no matter what. And he heard me and he didn't shut me down and he didn't judge me. I had a TA who, one of our students, very different place that our TA is from and the student was from. And the TA really wanted to get on this student about what the student shared. And I said, let's just love him and give him time. Let's just be here for him. That student is graduating in May and consistently reaches out to me, and now is a TA themselves in first year experience courses, and do some of that same work. So sometimes it's also understanding whether it is higher powers or it is people's conscience or just seeing people's humanity in real life and in real time, that you can dispel a lot of those what I call cave dwelling notions that people have, right? So one of the things, and we kind of hit this, I see it in the chat, see it in the Q&A, we're going to put up a quick slide. And what I want you all to do is grab your phones if you have one in front of you. And on that slide, I want you to think about, and I want you to answer this question. Go to the QR code, grab the QR code. What are some of the challenges around deliberative dialogue? Zack has surfaced a few. We've had people surfacing those in the chat. What are some of the challenges? What do you all say? There you go. There's one. Strong opinions. Let's get some more. Good. It's one of the biggest challenges. I studied to be a Lutheran pastor, and we used to invite every religion and non-religion to campus because my mentor, Reverend Dr. Timothy Maschke, said, I don't want you teaching other people about faith if your faith is so weak you can't hear other people's ideas. So these are huge, right, in this word cloud: hostility, inflexibility, misconceptions, insecurity, being vulnerable, right, apathy, discomfort, uncertainty. We're getting a lot of yeses and amens to vulnerability, fear, uncertainty, discomfort, insecurity, ignorance, all of these things. It's all really powerful, y'all. If you are watching this on a recording, one of the advantages to doing it that way is you can still interact with this word cloud and this experiment, right? We're going to quickly shift to some resources. So especially because we are all in education in one way, shape, or form, we got to get something, right? We got to get something. So there's another slide that we're going to share real quickly that if you grab that QR code, you should be able to grab on some resources. Alyssa, do you have that slide? She won't try again. We'll get that one up. There it is. Yeah, some deliberative dialogue resources that Rosie has gathered that are amazing. So I'm going to give people a few minutes to grab this QR code, download those resources, you have them, or bookmark it. You can still do that if you're watching this on the recording. So those resources will be available to you long term. So grab those things. And we're going to pivot to Rosie, who has done some amazing work around deliberative dialogue. And one of the two things that Rosie identified that are challenges around deliberative dialogue are what she's calling hot and cold moments in conversations. So moments when it gets really hot and moments when everybody's afraid to share. Rosie, what are some of your recommendations around dealing with some of those hot and cold moments, those times when people are afraid to share or they're too passionate about an issue? What are some of your recommendations about how to navigate those things?
Sure, and thank you. Welcome to everybody, and thank you for having me on. So a hot moment occurs when there's high levels of emotions in the room, and it might also include you. There might be a sudden eruption of tension or conflict, and depending on how you're feeling, you might find it more difficult to facilitate. So one thing to do, one thing I would recommend, and this might be formally part of deliberative dialogue, is to have community guidelines or ground rules or brave space agreements, so that you can rely on those if they get violated. And there's an article in the Google folder on brave space agreements, so you can take a look at that. But before you start the deliberative dialogue, I think it's helpful to do a little bit of navel gazing and decide and understand for yourself, what are your triggers? What is likely to get you upset? And think in advance about how you might handle those moments. There's a handout in the Google folder about regulating emotional regulation skills. So there's some tips there that will help build your emotional capacity for staying calm and centered and in the facilitator role when these hot moments come up. So when one comes up, it's okay to pause, take a breath, count to 10, take a moment to decide whether to address it then or as a group or with individual students now or later or in the next class. It's helpful to remind the students of the class discussion guidelines. You can give the students a chance to take a pause as well. Maybe give them a chance to do some written reflection on the topic that came up. When a student says something that is disruptive or potentially offensive, there's a handout in there about how to deal with microaggressions. And that applies basically to anything that might be offensive to someone else in the room. So there's some strategies there in that handout. But questioning and clarifying is always a good strategy. Asking the student, can you tell me more what you meant by that? Or what leads you to that opinion? Because sometimes when people say something that's offensive, it might have just come out in draft. And if you ask them to explore further, it might not be as harmful as it initially came out. Another idea is also has to do with letting students write down their ideas, but you can pass out index cards and have students write down their ideas on the index cards and then collect them and either read them out loud or redistribute them. So that allows students to contribute anonymously. Also, it's really important to acknowledge the dynamics in the room. I mean, as part of our culture, we tend to downplay emotions and think that emotions aren't professional, but emotions are real. And if you don't address those in the classroom, it's going to perpetuate harm. And so you want to acknowledge the dynamics in the room. You know, what just happened here? I feel the tension rising. What are you all feeling right now? That kind of thing. Another strategy for, tell me if I'm going on too long, Adam. Okay. Another strategy for hot moments is to do something to change the energy in the room. Maybe have students stand up and stretch or walk around the room just to kind of calm things down a bit. And then if you've got two students who are going at it, it's, oh, that's a great point. Emotional intelligence is key. Yeah. When you've got two students who are in conflict, help them try to find shared ground. You know, is there something that they can agree on? So those are some strategies for handling hot moments. There's a great handout in the Google folder from the University of Michigan about handling hot moments. And so the ones I read out were mostly from that handout. So they're explained in more detail in that handout. Now, cold moments, that is challenging as well. When you ask a question and it just hangs there and everybody's like, they're not making eye contact with you. And you're like, what's going on? So I've found that if you can be a little vulnerable yourself and share from your own experience, that can open up the students to feel a little more comfortable at sharing their own experience. Also, structure is your friend. So the more structured you can make the dialogue, the deliberative dialogue, the more willing I think students will be to participate. So there's a handout from the Constructive Dialogue Institute about structures they call it constructive dialogue, but it's pretty much the same thing. So some examples, I'm sure you're familiar with think, pair, share. So that's anything you can do to get students to share their ideas with a small group or another person before they share them to the whole class. That can be helpful. The more structured you make the discussion, maybe you come up with a handout with focused questions and you discuss them in small groups first. Also, you can do something called a value spectrum, where you have a question and you have the two ends of the continuum and you ask students to get up and move around and stand where they are in the value spectrum. So those are some ideas for cold moments. You can also use the index card idea for cold moments, so that you've got some fodder to work with.
Well, these are, I mean, Rosie, brilliant, right? But one of the things I do when we're talking about just the setup of the classroom, the setup of the space, I got a group of students who every class, because the class is a lecture style setup, but I have this group of students that they move it into pods before class starts. And I love on them and take them to Chipotle a couple times a semester, these guys. But they set it up and then they put it back, because I've noticed that importance of sitting together. I even have students use the old placards we used to use in middle school. I hand out poster board or, whatever that is, cardstock, and they write their name on it, whatever they want to be called. And it's a way for me to quickly, it takes maybe a week and I know everybody's name, right? And it's a great way to take attendance, just a point, because anybody whose name wasn't taken wasn't in class that day. But they also see each other's names, right? And then that isn't that girl over there in the Uggs, that's Brittany, and she's a human, right? And they're looking at each other. And so those setups also help too. One of the pieces, Zack, that I want to get to is the realities, because we have a question about the current political climate. How do you protect? You talked about being canceled, right? How do you protect ourselves in this world and our students? If Zack, you or Laurie could take it around any backlash or perceived backlash. One of the things that I will add that I thought Rosie said that was one of those snapping moments is you have to be, if this is where you want to go as an instructor and you want to, because you don't know what's a hot button issue anymore, right? So if you want students to learn and you don't want them to transact with their education, then that requires you to be vulnerable yourself, right? I mean, I don't want everybody to be like me. I tell students I love them, and they know I do. But when you lead with your story and with your stuff and you're a little self-deprecating, young people today are so used to themselves and others putting on masks that they'll immediately respond very differently if that's the way you want your class to go, right? So Zack, thoughts about in this current world, the fears that our colleagues have on campuses and our students have of negative backlash if they say the wrong thing. And can you also, I want you to blend in with this, bro, because as a multiracial Black person, I know that the very conversations that my white family does not talk about at family gatherings are the very opposite things that my Black family talks about all the time. So we have to understand that difference in culture too, not only what people communicate about, but how people communicate. Because in my family, we just don't talk about certain things, right? And we just leave it alone. But that's a completely different thing if you're in a Somalia family or in a Laotian family or whatever it is. And so we have to acknowledge those cultural differences, not just how we talk, but what we talk about, right? So can you kick us off just about the threats to people's realities and then the acknowledgement of cultural differences around and gender differences around conversations?
So, okay, I want to do that. And Rosie got my brain going, as I'm sure she did with everybody on the call. So I want to just add one more thing to what Rosie was saying and what Laurie was saying. The importance of humor and creativity in these spaces, I can't emphasize that enough. And you can't always do it, obviously, because these are really touchy subjects. But using and modeling a casualness and a humor that holds people and not doesn't alienate people, like Professor Smith is talking about, hey, I love you all. I mean, that takes down the temperature 110 degrees. Also starting off a presentation with, okay, we're all just gonna, right? Doing that like somatic breathing work is really, really important. On the creativity note, I think it's really important. A lot of our students went through COVID, right, and the lockdown, and so they're not used to working in groups as much. In one of my classes, I have folks uh, tap into their creativity and artistry by making a music video in a group around a social justice issue. And so, people look at me all strange making a music video. This is not MTV, but tapping into students' artistry and having, maybe students from different backgrounds and different thought processes and have not talked to each other before, do a collective project where they make a music video around a social justice topic has been really fun for the students and has, I think, changed the tenor of the class a lot. Okay, now with backlash, yes, it is a very scary time. Me and my Muslim and Jewish colleagues give these presentations at different colleges and universities through ISMA Shema Consulting, and a couple places have not liked what one of my team members or me have said. And so I think what we try to do is first, if we're going to build trust in this space and it's going to be, a safe space, a brave space, a caring space, we ask folks to not record because students are not going to want to share their ideas or their heart or their headspace if they feel as though they're being recorded. Many of my students have also said in the past, talking about cold moments, Rosie, I'm not going to share anything because I'm not an expert. And if I share something that pisses someone off, I'm not going to have any friends in this class. So that one part of not recording is really, really important. And I think if you step in it and you say something that, offends people, we make it a point to meet with the different constituencies, the Hillel group, the Muslim Student Association, before and after our workshops. And I think building that trust beforehand is really important. And then afterwards, did that feel okay? Was there a part that was not? And if you really did step in it, apologizing is really important. But also there are certain players and actors who are not good actors, and they're trying to sink people's ship and score political points and things like that. And you have to differentiate the two. And so, I don't know if we're going to get into legal things that people may have gotten into, which is also unfortunate and very legalistic time we're living in. But the last portion of the question, there are a lot of cultural differences when we come into these spaces. And I think when we talk about triggers and what triggers people, I have found it successful where students also front load some of their mannerisms, and they say, hey, everybody, like, sometimes I talk really loud, and it doesn't mean that I'm mad at you. It's just like when I get excited about something, I just talk really loud and I use my hands, and it doesn't mean that I'm trying to make fun of you. And other students have front loaded, it's like when they're saying pronouns, or they're saying their name, or they're saying where they're from and things like this. I also I kind of talk I talk softly, and it doesn't mean I'm like disinterested. And sometimes like I fidget, I fidget with this thing, and it doesn't mean that I'm not interested in this. But having folks be vulnerable of what is their little mannerism might result in a lot of pain reduction in the future, because people often misinterpret people's body reactions as that person hates me, which is not the case. Okay, I'll pass it to Laurie.
And I think one of the when we're talking about incivility and how to make sure that we are able to share and get our students to share in these classrooms, we really have to spend time on and meaningful time on classroom norms, and really help making students understand what does it look like and what does it sound like, what does it feel like when we're creating those norms. A lot of times we have might Google or ask AI what's a list of classroom norms and post them up in our classroom, and we assume students know what those mean. And in today's society, that's really difficult, because we see all kinds of behaviors that may or may not be appropriate, or may not be conducive to a constructive conversation or a dialogue. So it's really spending time on building those norms with students, helping them see and understand what are the associated behaviors, and how do those behaviors help us as a group be more successful. And then on the flip side, when we're all over, really referring back to those. How did that go? There was a moment in this class when I felt a lot of tension. And how did our classroom norm either help us relieve that tension and work through it, or how did it not? How did it help us bury it? Is there something we need different as a classroom norm? So I think spending time on norms is really helpful, and then helping to help students share who they are and how they want to engage in this space. So having them reflect on the norms and how is that going to help you as a student and your work in our space as a group. I think that's really helpful too.
Yeah, Laurie, brilliant. I think one of the challenges I've had at the institutions where I've been honored to serve is that when something happens, whether it's so big to be on Saturday Night Live, or student gets recorded saying or doing things that are crazy, hateful, harmful, then we get the university statement that, quote unquote, this isn't who we are. And I used to be a football coach. I'm just going to tell everybody, if you don't coach it, then this is who you are. This is exactly who you are. So if all you do is assume that your players know how to block and tackle, whether they play for the Buffalo Bills or they play for a high school in upstate New York, then it is your fault as the coach because you didn't teach. So part of this is our responsibility, to Laurie's point, that we can assume the norms that we have on a campus, in a community, in a classroom that the students have. So this is their setting. This is them saying, like I put in the chat, I have a strict no cell phone policy. Like, you will not pull out your phone in my class. And people say, well, they do. And I tell them to put their phone away. But the first class, I tell them why I have a no cell phone policy. This isn't high school. I don't care if you're distracted. I'm getting paid regardless, right? But this is the Kevin Hart concert. And Kevin Hart doesn't let you have your phone out in his concert. And I say to the students, well, why? Why doesn't, well, distract other people? No, why? Well, and a student inevitably says what Kevin Hart says belongs to Kevin Hart. And what I say belongs to me. Like, people pay me to do speeches for them. I write books, I do things. That is my intellectual property. And that's the reason you can't have your phone out, is you are stealing something that belongs to me. And the student's like, oh, Adam, I get it. So it isn't just having norms, because that's high schooly, but creating those as a community and understanding why. Why is this the thing and the standard that we're holding to, right? And not making any assumptions. Assume nothing. They know nothing about higher education. And anything they learn about it, they've learned from us, good or bad. And so we have to set those expectations. One of the pieces that Rosie has talked about, and some of her potential negative things that could come from deliberative dialogue, is a potential negative experience, Rosie, right? That could cloud the rest of the class. Can you talk about how to manage that? And maybe as an instructor, how to manage your expectations, right? If you're going to talk about something, how is this going to go? And it ends up like a Led Zeppelin, right? So can you talk a little bit around the challenges around managing expectations and how to overcome that? And when you have a rough one, how to have that not put a cloud over the whole class, Rosie?
Sure. I'll start with the managing expectations. So I think the first thing is you can't expect to be perfect at it every time, or even anytime. You're going to make mistakes, right? So that's something to keep in mind. You also can't expect to make everyone comfortable. In fact, if everyone's comfortable, you're probably not having the kind of conversation that stretches people's comfort zones and is their learning edge. Also, you can't expect to change students' views overnight, right? And that, in fact, that shouldn't even be your goal, because in deliberative dialogue, the point is to listen to views and to gain understanding of different viewpoints. So you shouldn't even be trying to change people's views. So you want to let go of winning, right? That's not the purpose here. As Laurie was saying, this isn't a debate. And also, probably somebody's going to get offended. So the thing you do is equip yourself with the tools you need to address that when that comes up. So those are some things to keep in mind. Now, as far as having a negative experience impact the rest of the course, I believe that a central part of deliberative dialogue is the reflection that happens afterwards. And so that's a place where you can have a debrief about how the discussion went and talk about how people reacted to what was said, what did you learn from it. I think that debrief can go a long way towards ameliorating any negative impact on the rest of the course. And also, if something comes up that impacts individual students, it's a great idea to go and check in with them afterwards and see how they're doing.
Really good. Well, and you have to, if you aren't in tune with your class, right? I mean, I said football coach. I knew my guys. There were times that they just weren't going to do it. I mean, I coached the O-line. So when they said they weren't going to, they just wouldn't do it. Man, coach, we ain't doing it today. And I have to go to the head coach and say, we're not doing that today, coach, because they're sore. But it's the same way with you as an instructor. You have to know your players. You have to know your students and know, hey, is this the time to back off? I know we have our lesson and we're going to do X, but there's times that they're feeling some type of way. We don't know what's happened at the Darty or what happened on the weekend or what's happened in their lives, or they're just feeling some type of way. So sometimes it's just dropping little nuggets. Deliberative dialogue can be throughout a course, in any course, just creating space for honest conversation on differing opinions, right? It doesn't have to be, we're going to talk about, Gaza today. That's hard, right? And you're setting an expectation that just might be hard for you to manage and hard for them to meet. Zack, I wanted to turn to you because Bailey has a great question in the chat. Encouraging deliberative dialogue, but also the realities around microaggressions. And I would just call it harm doing, right? I've never worked at an HBCU, would love to, but the reality is I've been at PWIs, and most of my classes, I may have 3 or 4 students of color in a 35 student class. And so I don't want, when we're talking about, like, we'll talk about privilege sometimes, and we'll just start with, how did you get in the room? How did you get in the building? And students will all say, oh, I don't remember. Was the door heavy? Was the ground smooth? Was how, my mom's in a wheelchair, like literally with the tennis balls in the front. She would know how she got in this building. Is it a privilege that you don't even know how you got here because you just walked? And that's an easy conversation, right? But those are hard conversations when you get into race, you get into religion, you get into sometimes orientation, you get into gender issues. We don't want women carrying the banner for women in the class, and we have to have the woman carry. So how do you balance that as an instructor when you're doing deliberative dialogue? To Bailey's question, encouraging that, but also not wanting to do harm to people in the class. And I wanted to pivot and just talk about making sure that the people of a certain identity don't feel like they have to carry the mantle for the entire race, gender, orientation. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah. There was someone in the chat here that was saying they're an Indigenous woman and they feel kind of scared to talk about identity, power, privilege, oppression in this political climate. And I could tell, I do this every day. I could tell even in my body right now, it's like, uh-oh, this is a big stage. I don't want to say the wrong thing, et cetera, et cetera. But I think with that notion of harm reduction, I come into class and the first thing I do is I talk a little bit about what's going on in the outside world, right? I mean, I'm in Los Angeles. My students' parents are fearful of the ICE raids. Some of them are not going to work. Some of my students that work in K through 12 or that go to K through 12, they're not going to school because they're scared. And so I think acknowledging that these ICE raids are happening and acknowledging that a lot of harm is being done to people's lives is really important for a lot of people in the room because it, in a small way, coming from this, Ashkenazi white Jewish guy, I see you. I have not lived your experience, but I see you, and this is a inequity in society. And also at the same time saying that, also acknowledging that the SNAP benefits, right, are hurting so many Americans right now, right? Like 43 million Americans. And this cuts across white, Black, Latino, Asian, you name it. And so I think naming the inequalities in society that are cutting across a bunch of different identities is also a way to build solidarity in this classroom. So that's part one, naming the elephant in the room of the things that are happening. I've worked at predominantly white institutions, and I've worked in DEI centers, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I used to be able to more freely talk about power, privilege, and oppression. Some of my colleagues have been pushed out of the field. Some of my colleagues, they've shut down the DEI centers. They've had to rename the DEI centers. And the DEI centers were where a lot of these deliberative dialogues were happening. So in the classrooms that I have now, some of the basic stuff that you know not to do. If you're talking about a certain topic and there's only one student in the room that identifies with that identity, don't call on the student and say like, hey, what do you think? Because it makes it's inappropriate and it causes more harm. I try again to create that environment where I'll talk about the current event, I'll talk about the hot topic in a way that's left, right, and center. But as the course goes on, I will start letting my hair down of this is where I fall on the political spectrum. You don't have to agree with me. But if I want you to be vulnerable with me, I'm going to be vulnerable with you. And here are the reasons of how I got to this political identity. And I go into, my father was born in a refugee camp in Europe, and my father's an immigrant, and and I'm scared for my job, and so I just got citizenship to Europe. If something goes wrong in this country because they're deporting people, so I show my cards, and then that usually results in students saying, okay, well, I may not agree with him, but I'll show him my cards as well. And when you can get to that authentic place, it's really, really, it's a beautiful thing. And when I walk into a room, people see this face, they see this skin color, they see this, and they automatically think, "Nah, this guy's a certain way." And half of the room will write me off, and half of the room will be like, "Oh, this is my guy." But once we humanize each other, we see that, oh, maybe we have more in common than we think, and we can actually work on these things together through politics, through research, through scholarship to change some of the things that are affecting our communities.
I would say both of those people that assume when they see you that you're a certain way are wrong. That's my guy right there. So one of the things, and we're going to pivot to Laurie in a second, that I think the elders and the ancestors would have to tell us at this time. Sometimes you got to stand on a bridge, y'all. I mean, I've stood on the crest of the Edmund Pettus Bridge on Jubilee Day, 51st year, where people were standing in their Sunday best, just trying to go on a march, right? And on the other side were people who were duly elected. Bull Connor was an elected official. And I think we forget those things and we glorify them. I live in a state that the airport, international airport in Kentucky, is named after a person who during his time was reviled, Muhammad Ali, right? Until he was proven right. And so I think, and I tell this to our students when they come, I get first years, like freshmen, freshly mowed grass, right? Perfect. But I tell them there's a reason why the old people are attacking these learning centers, because we're not here to teach you what to think, we're teaching you how to think. I don't care what you think. Just be able to defend it, be able to believe it enough that you can listen to what somebody else thinks, right? And I love you enough to give you space to figure it out. But that is so important. And I want all y'all, 288, 55 people, to know there is nothing people can do to you that wasn't done to our ancestors 100 times. Zack's grandmother is a survivor of the camps. Okay? There's comes a point, it's a job. We're in this work to make global leaders and thinkers. And I understand we're in the long game, y'all. That's why y'all are here. But sometimes being afraid of all the things is exactly what the principalities and powers want. Okay? So you got that from Pastor Smith today. That's exactly what they want us to do, is be afraid. But we're all here. So Laurie, tell us a little bit about, because there's a great question in the Q&A about how to incorporate this. One of our colleagues, Christine, said, it's maybe better if we do it over term and we don't have a deliberative discourse day and we don't talk about the hard things on this day or at this time. How do we ingrain that into a course, like ingrain it into who we are? And how do we do that? Tips and tricks for different types of classes, science classes, right? Sociology classes, okay, that's easier. Psychology classes, all of these, criminology, right? And can you talk a little bit about online? Because our folks are remote and online are saying, y'all are talking face to face. Talk about the online space and how we manage this in online spaces, please.
Sure. I think one of the things that I always think about in terms of deliberative dialogue is that they are skills that we're asking students to develop. Skills like active listening, things like sharing your opinion, things like changing your opinion, that it's actually okay to change your opinion, to think about evidence and where that evidence is coming from. And there are big topics. There are so many big topics happening in the US right now and around the world. And there are also opportunities to give opportunities for students to think about topics that allow them to practice. You know, even saying, and I talked to a colleague from Canada who said one of the things that she starts with her class is to have a deliberative dialogue on what's better, pancakes or waffles. And that, again, who are you? How do you share your opinion? How do you listen to someone else? You don't just go in, it's waffles, period, end of story. Oh, I could see why. So it is there, that's practice, and that's practice that allows students to develop those skills in safe places. And if you think about your content area, there are areas and topics that are ripe for conversations, ripe for these kinds of dialogues. When we were preparing our course, we talked to Sandy Marshall, who did a demonstration of a deliberative dialogue on Civil War statues. And should they be removed? Should they be added in context? How do we add them? We had a faculty member do a deliberative dialogue on the use of AI and the ethical use of AI. We had someone talk about, taught Bio 101 and did a deliberative dialogue on the ethics around the CRISPR gene. So there, if you think about your topic and you think about your content area, there are opportunities to give students practice with deliberative dialogue many times over. So if we think about a first year student starting with a class, if they have experiences with deliberative dialogue in 4 different classes in their first semester and then in their how much better they're going to get at this as they go through time. An example and a resource for that is Project Pericles. It's a great resource that has samples of deliberative dialogue for different types of classes, and I'll drop the link in the chat. If you think about online instruction, think about how you structure your discussion forums, how you set classroom norms and online, and then how can you roll out a discussion in an asynchronous environment, asking really thought-provoking questions, giving students opportunities and resources to respond to, using tricks like they can't see what someone else posted until they post, things like that. It is tricky, it's difficult to do it in an online environment, but it's critical, it's really important. And having students see what impact does putting something in text without having the ability to give context to it and not having this is how someone said it, how that impacts your message. And that's an important thing for everybody to learn now that we're relying solely on texting, it feels like, and email and things like that. So those would that would be my suggestions.
Really good, Laurie. Okay, we've got about 5-10 minutes. I want to make sure that we get questions. So can we pivot real quickly, all of the folks? What questions do you have? Throw them in the Q&A. We're going to take 5 or 10 minutes just of your questions. So things that haven't been addressed, things that haven't been asked, please throw them in the QA really quickly. Zack, as people are doing that, what are some of the soft skills? Yeah, students learn how to think and do all the things, but what are some of the real muscles that students are using that are transferable to the job market and to life after college? So what is the point, right? Yeah, we want students to be thinkers, learners, all those things, but why are we doing this, and how is that going to apply to how an engineer does their work on a day-to-day basis?
I mean, the work that people are doing on this call and in the chat and et cetera, it's very difficult work because it's going up against a multi-billion-dollar industry of the algorithms, right, on social media. And so I think which is they make money to get people upset with each other and clickbait and likes and things like that. So I think what we are providing is a skill of how do you uh, 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 listen to someone deeply at the workplace? How do you collaborate and find consensus amongst a bunch of different people in the workspace? And that's for the humanities to the sciences, whatever. There's critiques of, I mean, there were critiques of millennials, but now there's critiques of Gen Z. They don't know how to work with each other in the workspace. They're too this, they're too that. I think what we are offering is a new lens into patience, grace, holding differences and different ideas. And again, not necessarily agreeing with them, but holding them and seeing a through line of how can we be a bridge to a better place as a workplace, as a society, et cetera. And I just want to quote one of my mentors, Aaron Jones, who says, being a bridge is a beautiful thing, but it's also quite painful sometimes because you are walked on so much. And so I think some students, we start building that resilience in this classroom of being the bridge at first feels great because you're getting people to understand each other. But once you get walked on the first time, the second time, it really, really hurts. But if you keep going at it and you build that understanding and resilience that hurt people, and healing people start healing people, then you start getting to a real magical place.
Yeah. Well, and I think about the expectation of hurt, that this is going to be hard. I mean, people didn't sit at Woolworth lunch counters because that was cute, right? Harvey Milk and the homies didn't do what they did in San Francisco and California because it was fun and popular. They knew it was going to come with a thing, like literal threats to their bodies, right? And at some point you have to gauge. I'm a professor in a classroom. What is the threat to me? Is it worth it? And is silence, right? Dr. King said, our generation will not be known, right, for the horrific acts of our enemies, but the silence of our friends. And the reality is, as a grandfather, I will not have the world be for my grandbabies what it is right now. And my mom said the same thing, but the world is the same because people weren't willing to push past being uncomfortable and gut some of these things so we can have conversations. Rosie, one of the questions that somebody put in the chat is, do you recommend requiring students to engage verbally? So students who are not comfortable with engaging verbally, maybe pivot that way. What are some suggestions that you have? Maybe students don't want to do that. Is there other ways that you recommend for instructors who are in person or online? How do you get student engagement for the students who are just not comfortable verbally engaging?
That's a great question, and it has a lot to do with accessibility and attention to different needs in the classroom. So I would lean on the side of not requiring students to verbally engage, but finding other ways for them to participate. So I haven't tried this, but a colleague of mine says, has participation points in his class. And if a student emails him after class with a comment on something that occurred in the classroom, he'll count that towards participation. I think it's part of universal design for learning as well, to provide multiple means of engagement. And so as creative as you can be to hear all voices, understanding that some students are going to have anxiety about sharing verbally.
And use it, I mean, asynchronous. People are asking, Laurie, Rosie, if you have any resources for asynchronous courses that you have specifically, or any of our colleagues, any of the 200 plus colleagues that are here today, drop some things in the chat for quick, okay? And for some of the other people, for all of us who need resources, right? One of the things I try to do is multimodal. So I don't do anything in person that I don't give students a chance to do in a discussion board, because I have students that are on the spectrum who aren't just, that's just not their vibe. And I have also students that just don't want to do that, right? But I want them to feel like they're included. I want them to feel like they can participate. I have some students who are processors too. I'm a verbal processor, so I can do that. But I have students that need some time to think about a thing. So if we have a discussion in class, we also have that discussion on the discussion board. And you don't have to do both, but there's students who, hey, I just need you to do one, do something. Or if you're not comfortable with that, come to my office and, I have open doors, so we can just sit and vibe and we can talk about it, right? But we have to model not just taking space for ourselves, but making space for others. And to Laurie's point, making sure we're doing different things so they can be involved. One of the other questions that ER is asking, Laurie, if you can take this one, what do you recommend if a student says or does something that's hurtful or harmful in the class? Do you recommend that they apologize? Do you recommend whatever? What do you think is the best thing? And I think there's lines because we have university standards on how we treat each other, and that gets handled by dean of students and conduct and all these other things. But maybe if something violates the class norms that we agreed to, so it doesn't go to the level of university stuff, but it kind of violates what the team agreed to in the class. How do you recommend folks handle that?
I think I would take it as a personal conversation with that student. Take them aside and have a conversation. Do you understand what you said? I saw the reaction that the student you were directing it towards gave. That their reaction showed me that they were hurt, they were upset, they were challenged by that, and really have a conversation with them. What do you think are the next best steps? What would you do if you were the other person and someone said this to you? What would you want to have happen? Because I think it's really difficult to just say, you must apologize, and you must apologize in front of everyone. I think that is, it's oftentimes insincere and it's challenging. So it should really be a learning opportunity for the student, and that really has to be a conversation. Rosie, I'd really be interested in what you have to say about that as well.
Yeah, given the time limitations, I'll just direct people to the handout in the Google folder on responding to microaggressions. So there are, I think, 7 or 8 strategies, including questioning, educating, empathetic relating, making the invisible visible, responding later. Yeah, so those are explained in the document, and there are examples. And there's also you can practice those. You can grab a buddy and practice those with the handout on classroom scenarios. So in the classroom scenarios, a student says something that is pretty offensive, and then you could work with a friend to practice those, because if you internalize those options, it'll be easier to pull them out of your pocket when you need them. Otherwise, you just get the deer in the headlights. Oh my gosh, that person just said something racist. How do I respond?
Yeah.
So practice.
Yeah. It's so important to give yourself grace too, y'all. Yeah. I mean, we're gonna step in it. That's how you transform lives. You have to be willing to color outside the stinking lines a little bit, right? And so it requires vulnerability. It requires, I always say to my student, my intention doesn't matter, the impact does. So I never say I didn't mean to. It don't matter. If you're hurting, you're hurting. You don't just apologize to somebody when you've hurt them, you apologize when they're hurting.
Right.
And so it's okay to say, I'm sorry. I'll do better. I say to students, I screwed up. I use other bad words too, right? But they hear that, and that's approachable. And we want to model for them the kind of people we want them to be. And if they learn chemistry along the way, that's great. Yeah. But what kind of human do you want to be? I think, Laurie, we're going to finish with this. Laurie, Rosie, what brings you to this work? One of the questions somebody asked is, Why do you do the work you do? What brought you here? And there's a great theologian, Frederick Buechner, that talks about vocation is where your greatest gift meets the world's deepest need. This is both your vocation. What brings you to this as your vocational calling?
We need to have our students, regardless of their age, if they're 40 and going back to school, if they are just starting out in higher ed, we need to have adults in this world who are able to have meaningful conversations with others to solve problems and to understand the plight of others and to understand the viewpoint of others. And the more you listen, the more I listen to the news and just overhear conversations wherever I am, it's a skill that's missing, and we have to bring it back. And who better to do that than the educators? We will save the world. I believe that strongly. And I think we have to start now.
I agree with you completely, Laurie. And I'll also add that my area of work right now is diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I feel that social justice is sort of striving for social justice is at my core and in my soul. And so my goal is to combine social justice strategies to employ them in the classroom so that all students feel included, feel valued, feel like they contribute, and can feel heard. And what Laurie said.
And the last thing I'll add before I kick it back to Alyssa, y'all know education is justice work. See, if we intertwine justice work into the fabric of everything, that was our mistake. It was the responsibility of an office or a person, right? If that's intertwined into everything we do, every classroom, it can't be unwoven. It can't be defunded, right? But education is a way of doing justice. I live by Micah 6:8, do justice because it's required. Love mercy because it's required, right? Walk humbly because it's required. And I think trying to find ways to apply that not just to our students, but to each other, y'all. Give each other that same grace and understanding that we try to give our students. I want to give kudos to ACUE for making this space. Also want to give a shout out to ACUE as an amazing trainer of faculty around these issues. So if you want more, they're the folks to reach out to. They are the subject matter experts. Alyssa, thank you all so much.
Thank you so much. And Adam, this was an incredible, insightful discussion. Thank you to our panelists. If you are interested in deepening your understanding of deliberative dialogue and how to implement it in your classroom, we offer a deliberative dialogue quick study course that can be taken in just a few hours. You can learn more about the course by visiting acue.org or reach out to partnerships@acue.org to discover how our comprehensive faculty development ecosystem can support teaching excellence at your institution. You can also learn more by visiting us. We'll be at Student Success US NHETC in Atlanta next week. So if anybody's going to be there, stop by. ACUE will be delivering the annual Movement Maker Awards, hosting a Commons live event, and a lot more. And we'd love to see you at the event. And on that note, thank you for joining us today, and thank you for the important work you do to support our higher education community. We hope to see you next time. Thanks, everyone.